The locals called it black pine, a stretch of forest so dense that even midday sunlight rarely touched the ground. It lay like a dark scar across the northern border of the county. 30 square miles of ancient pines and crooked logging roads that hadn't seen a truck in decades. Every small town for 50 miles had its own story about those woods. Some swore the trees were magnetized, that a compass spun helplessly if you walked too far. Others spoke of sudden dead zones where radios went silent, or of hunters who stepped off the trail and returned hours later, with memories missing, like film burned away in patches. But the tale most often whispered was of the Whistler, a voice that called travelers deeper until they vanished. For Aaron Miller, those stories were only fuel. At 23, he was a wildlife photographer chasing his first magazine cover, hungry for landscapes no one else had captured. He arrived in late autumn when daylight drained early, and the night air carried the sharp metallic smell of coming frost. If he reached a secluded glacial lake rumored to sit in the forest's heart, he could photograph it under a cold moon before winter sealed the roads. He parked at a ranger gate just after noon. The ranger on duty barely looked up from his paperwork when Aaron signed the log. "Stay on a marked road," the man said without warmth. "Don't follow any sounds off trail. If you hear whistling." He stopped, frowned, and simply added, "Just keep moving toward the road. Understand?" Aaron laughed it off, but a chill followed him as he shouldered his pack. The hike began like any other, pine needles soft beneath his boots, air sharp and resin scented. But as he left the gravel road for a narrowing footpath, the forest seemed to close behind him like a great green gate. Sound dulled. Even his own footsteps softened, as though the moss drank every noise. By late afternoon, he had traveled 6 miles without seeing a single bird. Not even the buzz of insects. Only the slow drip of melting frost accompanied him. He finally found a small clearing beside a sluggish black creek. The ground was level, the view perfect for a night shoot. He set up his tent, snapped a few frames of the darkening canopy, and lit his tiny stove as twilight bled into deep indigo. That was when he heard the whistle. 3 notes, soft, rising, almost playful, slipped between the trees like a ribbon of smoke. Aaron froze, spoon halfway to his mouth. The sound was too clean, too deliberate to be wind. He scanned the clearing, heart thudding against his ribs. No movement, no echo. Then, faintly, the 3 notes came again, this time farther to the left, as if circling. "Probably some hunter," he whispered, though he had seen no other hiker since morning. And the nearest town was over 20 miles away. Darkness fell like a dropped curtain. Aaron zipped his tent, but the forest refused to settle. Twigs snapped in the brush. Something heavy shifted near the creek, and once low, almost teasing, the whistle floated closer, repeating the same 3 ascending notes. He gripped his camera like a weapon and forced himself to name harmless explanations. An owl call, a fox, a trick of air pressure. But the list grew thinner as the hours crawled toward midnight. He woke to clicking, sharp, rhythmic like stones tapping together. Through the mesh of his tent, a pale glow shimmered across the ground. Mist had pooled around the clearing, rolling low and heavy like cold smoke. The whistle came again, clear and deliberate, only a few yards away. Adrenaline ripped through him. He snatched his flashlight, unzipped the tent, and stepped into a world drowned in silver. The mist glowed faintly under the moon. Branches slick with dew. No footprints. Nobody's. But to his right, half hidden behind a cluster of pines, something gleamed. A small wooden totem carved with endless spirals. Aaron raised his camera and snapped a photo. The flash burst across the clearing, and the whistle answered instantly, this time directly behind him. He spun, light slicing the fog. Nothing. Heart pounding, he shoved the totem into his pocket. Suddenly the forest felt wrong. Each tree a duplicate of the last, their trunks leaning subtly inward. As if closing a trap, he decided to break camp and head back. But every path he chose bent in impossible loops. His compass needle twitched, quivered, then began to spin, The mist thickened until the ground itself disappeared. Aaron quickened his pace, breath rasping in sharp clouds. His flashlight flickered, its beam shrinking to a trembling circle. That was when he saw the figure. At first, it was only a deeper shadow among shadows. Tall, narrow, draped in something that drank the light. It stood perfectly still, yet the whistle rose from its direction, slow and teasing. 3 notes stretched almost lovingly. The flashlight guttered and died. Aaron ran. Branches clawed his jacket. Roots snared his boots. The whistle followed. Always 3 notes, always just beyond the next trunk. It never hurried. It didn't need to. The sound was patient, playful, as if it knew the forest better than he ever could. His lungs burned, legs trembling, when suddenly the earth dropped away. He tumbled down a hidden slope and landed hard on slick stones beside a black creek. Pain flared in his ankle, but the whistle was closer now, curling through the mist like a smile. Across the water stood the remains of cabin, roof sagging, door hanging by a single hinge. Its timbers blackened as though licked by fire long ago. Desperation overpowered caution. He splashed across and shoved the door open. Inside lay a single room, collapsed furniture, rusted tools, and dozens, hundreds of wooden totems, identical to the one in his pocket. Each bore the same spiraling pattern, their grooves worn smooth by countless fingers. The air smelled of damp earth and something sweeter, rotting sap, almost metallic. The whistle came again, but this time it was inside the cabin. Aaron turned. The doorway yawned empty. The sound repeated, 3 rising notes from the rafters above. Slowly, he tilted his head back. A shape crouched in the beams, impossibly thin, its limbs bending like wet branches, where a face should have been. Stretched bark-colored skin, and from a slit where a mouth might be, jutted a small wooden flute. The creature raised the flute and played the 3 notes, each one vibrating in Aaron's bones. The temperature dropped in an instant. Frost crept across the cabin walls, crackling like breaking glass. The totems began to rattle, their spirals seeming to spin on their own. Aaron stumbled backward as the creature unfolded, limbs stretching far too long, knees bending the wrong way. It descended silently, its feet never touching the floor. Aaron bolted through the doorway into the fog. The forest exploded with sound. Whistles erupted from every direction, overlapping in a shrill, dizzying chorus. Some were high and mocking, others deep and mournful, like flutes carved from bone. The trees themselves seemed to lean toward him, their needles trembling with each note. He ran blindly, branches tearing at his skin, until the mist thinned, and a faint orange glow bled through the darkness. A road, headlights. He stumbled onto the gravel and collapsed as a ranger's truck screeched to a halt. Aaron awoke hours later, in a dim ranger station. The officer who found him said he was miles from any marked trail. When Aaron reached for the totem to prove his story, his pocket was empty. His camera, however, still hung around his neck. Inside, every photo remained intact, except the one he had taken of the clearing. That frame was pure black, marred only by faint spiral scratches that seemed to shift when the light hit them. Aaron never returned to Black Pine, but some nights, when the wind slips through his apartment window just right, he swears he can hear a soft, rising whistle. 3 perfect notes, calling him back.